What's going on, everybody? My name is Nick.
And my name is Dave.
And this is The Deep Dive. And we are in our third week of our series called Grace on the Mountain. And today's topic is grace in our brokenness. That'll be
correct.
fun. Well,
it'll be fun. It'll
be fun to talk through, but not necessarily the idea of brokenness
informative,
being fun.
maybe.
That's a good way to put it, I think.
Yeah.
Let's get into it. Well, Dave, I think we are appropriately dressed today, as it is Valentine's Day on the day we are recording this.
That's correct.
What would you end up having for Teresa on the table this morning?
Well, we got flowers.
Nice.
She didn't want candy. this
Okay.
year, no candy. And she made breakfast this morning, had French
Ooh.
toast. But we're going to Disney World this week.
That'll be a lot of fun.
Yeah. So that's the big deal.
And a lot of people who are watching are now turning off because they're really sad that they don't get to go.
Yeah. But mine's going to be a real quick trip. I'm coming back on Saturday. I'm just driving down on Thursday, going to Epcot on Friday, Epcot. And then I'm flying back on Saturday because of church on Sunday. But Teresa's going to be down to the whole weekend to Monday with my daughter and her husband. So
That'd be awesome.
yeah,
I'm
it will
excited
be.
for you guys.
What about you guys? What'd you do?
We kind of had a little gift set up. Finley found this like giant, I guess it's a stuffed fox, or it might be a corgi. I don't know. They kind of look very similar, but that she really wanted, and we ended up finding that for her. And then we got Olivia a little record of The Greatest Showman. She got a record player for Christmas.
Okay.
So kind of adding to her collection there a little bit.
The Greatest Showman.
Yeah, she loves that show.
Oh,
or
man.
that musical.
Yeah, interesting. Okay,
Yeah.
cool. Yeah.
And then we got Krispy Kreme donuts, which for the people, a little fun fact about me is my family started Krispy Kreme donuts.
Really?
Really? They sold off the recipe.
How is it? I'm just hearing about this.
Yeah. Krispy Kreme donuts. My uncle will tell stories of working in the shop and making donuts and stuff like that with his grandmother and stuff like that. It's really cool.
Wow, that's a legacy.
So that's a little legacy point for Nick Yotha there. But
yeah, sure.
other than that, did flowers and candy, and
Nice.
Rachel really wants another bush out in the yard, so that's going to be kind of the big gift for her.
Okay.
I guess.
Well, cool. Well, let's talk a little bit about grace in our broken places.
Yep.
Just to get you up, if you haven't been watching or haven't seen any of the sermons, we're been looking at the Sermon on the Mount, at least the first part of the Sermon on the Mount, chapter 5, for the last 3 weeks. And so one thing I've said about it is you've got to look at it through the lens of grace. And when you do that, it just the whole thing changes. And so it really does as we get into this week. The first 2 weeks, the Beatitudes, the blessed are, we talk about how that was sort of the upside down kingdom of God in that. And then last week, you are the salt, you are light. But this week, you might think, well, where's the grace in that? Because Jesus starts out by kind of talking about the law.
Yeah.
Okay? Sometimes we think about law and grace and those things being separate. They really do go together. But you have to understand the law through the lens of grace, I believe. Yeah. So he begins by saying, you've heard it said, no, not that part. He says, let me back up.
You good?
He says, I've come not to abolish the law, but to fulfill the law.
Yeah.
Okay, and so we'll talk about how he fulfilled the law in a bit. But he is, what he is really kind of doing with the law that was there is sort of upping the ante. And to remind you, the 10 Commandments, that's the law. But there's many other laws in the Old Testament. I think that in the Talmud there's like 613 Jewish laws, 613 laws. And and there were other kind of interpretations of that some of them not written down in the Bible, sort of extra biblical stuff that rabbis and priests would have. And so the Pharisees kind of had a heyday with that. They were people that were really into keeping the law. And Jesus comes along and says, well, I'm not doing away with that. Yeah. But what I'm doing here, you've heard it said, do not kill, don't kill, don't commit a murder. But I say to you, if you've hated a brother, if you've gossiped a brother in your heart,
You've already done it.
You've already done it.
Yeah.
So, and then he says, you've heard it said, don't commit adultery. But if you looked at somebody and you've lusted, you've already committed adultery. He says, you've heard it say, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth.
Yep.
He said, no, that's not it anymore. We're up in the ante. He says, you need to love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you. So he kind of presents this almost impossible, well, not almost, it isn't impossible to fulfill, right?
It feels that way. And, when I like the phrasing up in the ante, because if you're a poker fan, you know kind of what that means. It's just like kind of pushing, making the action happen. And it's kind of really just forcing these people out of maybe a comfort zone that they once had with the law and saying like, no, there's another level to this that you're not maybe understanding.
Right. Well, I mean, we don't know exactly who is there as he is giving this sermon. My assumption is a lot of people. The gospel just says his disciples.
Right.
But if there are a lot of people, you're probably assuming they're like the Pharisees, or maybe you can imagine them sort of standing in the back trying to catch him doing something wrong. Because the criticism of him, of course, was that he ate with sinners and hung out with undesirables. That he's sort of like not strict enough in his adherence to stuff. And he's saying no, they ate on the Sabbath and stuff like that. Right. He says no, I'm not doing away with any of that. As a matter of fact, up in the ante.
Right.
That's what it is. And so he ends up this whole thing by saying, so therefore be perfect as my heavenly Father is perfect. So pretty...
That feels hard.
Hard.
Even from a young age, we're always trained to like, you're not going to be perfect. It's okay to not be perfect. Just try your best and stuff like that. And doesn't John Wesley, he believes that we can achieve perfection at some level in this world?
Well, I think probably perfection has to do with how we, perfection in love.
Yes.
But I think we have come, the way we in our culture and time have come to interpret what perfection means, perfect without, any errors, without any blemish without all those kinds of things. But, I think we can, we strive for whatever Christian perfection looks like, perfection in love looks like, knowing that we're always have to look at that through the lens of grace.
Right.
And so I gave a quote on Sunday, and I'll go ahead and read it again just because it's so good. I won't chance using my own words to, mess it up. But it's from Philip Yancey. And Philip Yancey used to be the editor of Christianity Today, the magazine. But he started writing books, and he's written a lot of incredible books. But this is one of his earlier books called The Jesus I Never Knew. And in that, he's got about 2 or 3 chapters that he dedicates to the Sermon on the Mount. And he says this about that, looking at the Sermon on the Mount. He says, the worst tragedy would be to turn the Sermon on the Mount into another form of legalism. It should, rather, put an end to all legalism. Legalism, like the Pharisees, will always fail, not because it's too strict, but because it's not strict enough. And so, because of that, the only place that we have to fall back is into the safety net of grace, into true grace. Because the Sermon on the Mount puts us all on level ground, whether we're a person who committed murder, or we're just somebody that gossips and hates people, adulterers, backstabbers, whiners, complainers, wherever we might feel like we are on the continuum, we've all fallen short. We need to fall into, the arms of Jesus and his grace. And
that's such an important thing, I think, for us to acknowledge and understand in ourselves is, especially, I think we as Christians, we tend to almost create a hierarchy of like,
right,
oh, you're so much better than I am, or you do things super well and I don't do things well at all, or oh man, you lied about that. I might have told a fib here and there, but you're lying. You know what I mean? Like, we try to give some sort of credit of like who's a better Christian, and want to be seen as this like I don't know, like museum style post of like, look how good I am.
Right. Well, we tend to like kind of draw our circle, very small about like, well, I know I do these things, but these people are so much worse than I was. And there's an epidemic of it. You see it in politics all the time with politicians saying, well, yeah, this person might have been caught doing that, but what about so-and-so? And so, it is this idea of kind of blame shifting or trying to get the evidence away from ourselves. Right. Because I think in our heart of hearts, we all have to recognize our brokenness, right? We're all broken people.
Yeah.
And what God desires for us, what Jesus came to fulfill and do for us, and what grace teaches us is that, to heal those broken places, to put us back together, and discover the real gift of love and grace that comes from God, not out of our own doing, nothing that we've done, but just sheer pure grace. And so,
there you have a piece of pottery here that's got some broken and before I kind of talk, we share about it.
Okay? So I shared this example on Sunday and actually had the pottery there. So the Japanese have this art called kintsugi, and I think that actually means golden journey. And that is when they're restoring pottery. When we talk about perfection, like if we have an imperfection, we kind of like to glaze over it and to repair it in such a way that shows that it's never been broken. And still, like when I think of a piece of furniture, I don't want to, you've got it and it might have had a crack and somebody came in, you can't even tell, right? But what they believed was that there was beauty in the brokenness and the broken places. So what they do is they put it back together. They trace the golden with gold those broken places because they feel like it's part of the story. And of course, I think there's a philosophy and metaphor in that as well, that there is beauty in our brokenness, and not that we're living our lives in shambles, not that we are reveling in our brokenness, but do we realize that when we are put back together, it can create something very beautiful. And so I've shared this story in my last church too. And this artist in my last church, Jennifer Baker, made this for me and gave it to me on my last Sunday. It's one of the greatest presents I've ever got, I have to say. Because I keep this in my office, and it reminds me of grace, and that we're all broken people, and just sort of to be in the business, which I think is Jesus' business of helping people be restored, not to cover up and to pretend that there hasn't been brokenness, but to find that beauty that's there.
Yeah, I think the further I've gone in my Christian walk, the more I understand this concept. But I can tell you that there was definitely a point where if anybody could see my scars or my cracks or my brokenness, that I would have been mortified.
Right.
Because I wanted to keep up some perception of me having it all together and all that stuff. But I think when that really transformed was reading about Paul and like he talks kind of like through this exact thing is, that there's beauty in the brokenness because that's where God shines through the most, is that like where he's taking where you're inadequate and he's making you more than adequate. You know what I mean? And I love this and I love that kind of story because,
Paul says, I didn't mean to interrupt, but Paul says his power is made known in our weaknesses.
Yeah.
And so, that's grace.
And that's awesome because I need to know that because as like a sports person coming up, I've hit 1,000 line drives, but the one time I struck out in the game, I was beating myself up over that. You know what I mean? Like, because I just fight for my failures, but I recognize like in my life, there were places that I was developing that weren't full and weren't whole. And finding that God loved me in that space and even showed me value and stuff like that. To me, it was a really instrumental time in my life.
Yeah, and I appreciate your vulnerability in saying that you have been mortified for somebody to see your brokenness. And there's a lot of questions or a lot of comments that we can make around that. Like, what is real Christian community? Should be a safe place for us to share our brokenness together. But yet, there are people that either get it or don't get it. And so, therefore, there's always going to be a judgmental person who is going to come in and not see their judgmentalness
Right.
as being they're part of their brokenness and their own insecurities. So do we deal with those people that are bound to be in our communities, in our our church gathering places?
Well, I think if you're one of those people who at me would have been mortified, you really have to take a check at your own pride and understand that, like, why do I feel like I have to put up this perfect front the whole time?
Right.
And I know for me, it was so other people would view me as strong and not weak in spaces. You know what I mean? So,
Right.
like, for me, it was a sense of pride to be well kept up and put together.
Yeah.
And especially sometimes, as I was young in my leadership, I felt like as a leader, that's what I had to show.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, people wouldn't trust my leadership if I was showing brokenness, or they wouldn't. But I don't know exactly when it changed, but I think I would tell those people, step back from your pride for a second and think about what the story you have to tell in your brokenness.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and I think it's in these stories where we're not whole that we have an opportunity to really share that's going to resonate with other people, because we're all going to struggle in
Right.
places. But another beautiful thing about this is that no two of these are going to be alike.
Right.
They're going to break in
They're
different
all
ways in
unique.
different spaces.
For sure.
And that reminds us that, like, we God has promised all of us, even in our unique spaces, a place to show grace. So
Yeah, and I mean, we could push this metaphor
yeah, forever.
forever. But I also do think, like, is to see we're all at some point in our journey towards restoration.
Yes.
And so, I mean, we can see this complete in this beautiful pottery. But my guess is that it is possibly more fragile than it was when it was new. And so that fragility, I think we need to understand that yes, we're broken people walking by grace, but also to understand our own limitations and our fragility around that.
Yeah.
I think there's lessons to be learned there as well.
For sure.
Yeah.
What would you, as a pastor, like, if somebody were to come and just, admit to you, like, hey, I feel broken in this space, what would be probably the thing that you would tell them first?
Yeah. Well, it depends on what
The situation was.
what the situation was. I'm thinking it just seems to be a recurring thing for us here, is to get help.
Yeah.
If you are in something that you are up over your head, you need to get help. If it's some sort of addiction thing, we have a 12-step program that meets here at the church. If you are, like, just in grief and just can't get through it, we've got grief support groups and stuff like that. Or there are others. It doesn't have to be done here, but finding the kind of help in the community. I think, finding people to be with you on the journey, whether to help you, hold you accountable, or to encourage you and help you know that you're not alone, to pray with you, and to be able to give grace to yourself, because lots of times we're hardest on ourselves.
Yeah. And I think that's huge, is to give that grace, because a lot of us are trying to figure it out along the way too. Like, some things in life you're not prepared for, like
Right.
sudden things that happen, or just like, I didn't know what it would be like to be a parent right away or whatever. And you have to kind of give yourself that grace and that patience to learn along the way, and understand that some things are just going to have to be learned through fire.
Yeah. We live in a world where more than ever, people present the best picture of themselves, whether it's on Instagram or Facebook, and realize that that's not reality.
Right.
The reality is pretty messy. It's 50%, whether it's a good, it's usually 51% to 49% of whether it's a good day or a bad day,
Yeah.
It
It drives me crazy. I you look on Instagram or something like that, and there's a girl there with, like, her hair all done and full cup of coffee, reading her Bible. It's like, I woke up this way. It's like, no, you didn't.
Yeah.
You did not wake up that way. Like,
Yeah,
It was a long process to get to the perfect spot where you felt like you wanted to take that picture.
yeah.
You know?
So right, but so, and I guess you can look at that through the lens of like what somebody's encouraging because they're sharing their faith or what that was meaningful to them in their devotional this morning
Right.
or whatever. But to not be intimidated by that. I mean, I don't want to come down hard on people taking a picture of their devotion books on Sunday. But at the same time, why are you taking a picture of your devotion book?
Right.
Maybe you should be reading your devotion book and doing that. So I hope that makes sense. But
Yeah, I mean, to me, I was more combating the like, why is your hair already like? You wake up in the morning, ain't nobody's hair like
right.
perfectly placed and the makeup's still on, or or for guys like, I'm not presentable until after I've taken a shower. You know what I mean?
I'm
Like
not even presentable.
my hair's like flying all over the place.
I'm barely presentable after that.
Yeah, facts.
Well, and one quote that I really like that I used on Sunday is that grace like water flows to the lowest places.
Yeah.
And so that would be my prayer and hope for people to realize that, when you're feeling low, that there is grace. And, if you've been hurt by church, if you've been burned by Christians, if you've been made to feel less than loved and less than being what God created you as His child, I apologize. I'm sorry. I hope that grace will flow to you, and that maybe somehow or another our church and our community can be a part of that. That is, I think that is our heart's desire as a church. I mean, I'm really feeling it here lately too, more than ever.
Yeah, I want people. I do want people to understand the idea of grace and understand it from the lens of like, you don't have to earn this. Like this is just something that is given because God's loved. You know what I mean? So
yeah, we really want to be stressed that all are welcomed without an asterisk.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
we love and we'll walk with everyone.
And it's amazing how many emails and texts and stuff like that we do. That was like, here's my story. Am I good?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, am I good to be here? And we're like, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. I mean, will you accept me in your church?
Yeah.
Absolutely. You accepted me.
Yeah.
That just, the openness and inclusivity and all of that. When people say God loves us just as we are, loves us too much to leave us that way. Mm. And so we've all got a story to tell.
That's right.
And a journey to go on. And it's fun sharing it together. So
absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, Dave, what's coming up next week? I know you've kind of said, I think we're taking a break from this Grace on the Mountain.
Right. Yeah. I think we're going to come back and pick up chapter 6 and 7 later in the year. We're going to have to schedule it. It may not get to it till this fall, but we're going to come back around to it. We got several things. We got Lent coming up and Easter. We got we're following the lectionary this year. We're coming up on Transfiguration Sunday. So we're staying up on the mountain, just a different mountain. And a very, very mystical, very hard to understand story from the Bible. Thing. But it will be good. It'll be good. We'll discover some mystery. And the title of the sermon this week is Thin Places.
Yeah.
Our thin spaces. And we're looking for those in our lives too, those places where God seems very real. So we're here a knock at the door.
Yeah.
Someone's knocking at the door.
There's a faint knock at the door, which is a good time because we're about to wrap this up anyway. Guys, we just thank you so much for watching. And as we jump into the Transfiguration, that'll be next week. And then we're in the Lent journey.
We're Lent. We'll talk a lot about Lent next week.
Yeah.
Because we're going to be right on top of it. Yeah.
So it's coming down quick, and it's an exciting time around church. And just want to invite you, if you've been watching us online for a while and you haven't been to church, come join us, come hang out with us. If you need to stay home, we totally are happy that you're watching and that you're there. And we're cool with that too. But we love the idea of Christian community, and as we've come to one service, that has been a beautiful part of it, is seeing everybody come together and But for the case of this, do you have anything else to add, Dave?
Not today.
All right.
We're good.
All right. Well, thank you guys for watching, and we'll catch you next time.
God bless.